How you guys doing today? This is Nick with Tactically Custom doing another ACR. Recently went to Defense Elements Anatomy of Structures class. Joined here with Joel and Heath. Joel was one of the students and actually my partner in that class. Heath is an instructor for Defensive Elements and was supposed to be instructing AI in that class. Ended up taking it as a student as well with his partner. So I have them on the show here to kind of talk about the class and get their thoughts on it. Thanks, guys, for joining me tonight.
No problem.
Absolutely.
So first I want to start, Joel, give me a little bit of background. I know you, obviously, but give me a little bit of background, kind of your training, what you do, and where you come from.
Yeah, so in terms of shooting and everything, I've been kind of seriously training for about 10 years or so. And that's been largely kind of flat range oriented stuff, with very, very, in the context of this podcast and everything, very little in terms of CQB, but just a little bit sprinkled in here and there. But mostly flat range stuff. Been doing that for about 10 years. And then I've also, I run Zulu nylon gear, and just design and manufacture tactical gear, pouches and bags and all that kind of stuff.
Which I will have to throw a shameless plug for you. We did a rifle class this weekend and shown why Zulus
we saved the day.
Sling, right? It works. QD mounts suck. They fail. They unmount if you don't have it right. And Zulu sling, you got to check them out. They don't need any of that crap. So good job, Joel.
Absolutely.
Heath, give me a little bit about you.
So it's my first day. No, same as Joel. I've been shooting pretty much my whole life, and started going down a training path about 8 to 10 years ago. Focus on square range, and then probably about, I would say 3 years ago, I started getting into force on force and CQB classes. And after that, that kind of turned into my new focus, because I felt those skills applied more to daily, like actual life, moving in and around people, putting myself in situations that are more likely to actually come up. And then I end up doing a lot of stuff for a lot of places. It seems like that it would kind of starting to feel like it would take up the show if I started running all that out. But
well, for those of you out there, Heath helps out with Tactically Custom as well as our go-to guy when it comes to gunsmithing, more technical stuff. So I appreciate having you on board, helping me out with that.
I appreciate doing it.
So and a couple other little quick shameless plugs for you, because I plug the guys all the time. Practically Tactical podcast. You go on that as well and talk.
Yep.
That and help AI. So I'll give you more time to shamelessly plug everything at the end, Heath, because I really talk you guys up a lot and totally different than what I do with these. So no problems there. So kind of giving a little background on what brought us here. So back in August, we did Alliance Police Department APD Shoothouse class with Joe Wire. Joel, that was your first time out there.
Yep.
Heath, you've been out there for years and hours and hours and hours. And that was my fourth one there this year, which is pretty awesome. So we all got exposed to that curriculum, and there's other ACRs that I've done on that as well. so I'm not going to dive too much in specifics of the CQB package and everything like that. But we then had Defensive Elements, which runs the same Strongwall type package that Joe Wire teaches, and they had that a couple weeks later out at Muncie, Indiana, an indoor shoot house, and I was able to talk Joel into coming for that one. They have some time, because I've gone down the rabbit hole. Joel, what was your coming into this? So obviously we did APDs back in August, and my first one, my head was in the clouds and trying to comprehend everything. It was just a lot of information coming at me. Once you go through that, kind of, what was your expectations going into the second version of this, or the second time doing this?
Same thing. I was kind of, as soon as you start doing anything related to shooting and advancing your skills, I think one of the hardest things to do is combine skill sets and like, sure, if you isolate a specific task you're trying to do or whatever, you can get really, really good and really fast at that. But as soon as you start, combining multiple skill sets together, which really this CQB package is taking a whole range of skills and ways to look at the world and ways to communicate with another teammate and ways to use your rifle and all that kind of stuff. It's so many things going on at once. You feel like you just got kicked in the deep end, and you're trying to do the most simple, task, and your brain is just scrambled, and you're able to pick up a lot, but it almost doesn't process until after, you don't fully soak it in. And so going into this, second attempt basically at this package, I was really looking forward to being able to break it down and see some more of the nuances with everything, and like, rather than go through a run and barely be able to comprehend what I just did at a very granular level. Now it's like I've got enough extra processing power in my brain now that I've practiced these things just a little bit, seen them a little bit. Now it's not brand new to me. Kind of go through it another time and actually really see what I'm doing, be able to be aware of myself as I'm going through that run and the decisions that I'm making and the real technical differences in the techniques that I'm using and all that kind of stuff. So going into this class, I was really looking forward to like actually being able to think about what I'm doing while I do it. And so that was really cool.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because I similarly, my first one was at APD with Joe, and then my next class was probably 3 weeks later, and it was Defense Elements, the first one that they put on, which was a 2-day. At that point, the class we just did was a 3-day, and same thing, right? You just get that fire hose of information, and now we talk on other shows and other ACRs that I've done, unlocking that mental load, right? There's stuff that goes to the back that I don't have to think about. Now I can start picking up on other things, right? And then hearing it again, it's like, oh, that's right. And things start to click a little bit more.
Yeah.
To unload that processor speed. So now you don't have to focus on the mundane things, right? Because that just becomes natural. Now it's the more nitpicky things and kind of building off of that. And in every class I've done, it's picking up different ways in how it's being brought or talked about to kind of understand it even better and keep building. So yeah, definitely. I definitely can understand what you're saying there. Heath, when you were there well, actually, I'm going to go back to Joel here really quick. What was your thoughts as far as a 3-day class for something like this? We just did a really long APD, 3 days, 38-ish hours. Were you excited for another 3-day class?
Yeah. Both looking forward to it and kind of bracing myself. I think it's necessary to have all that time. It's a pretty intensive, physically and mentally kind of process. And, it's hard work. It definitely separates people that are doing this stuff as like a hobby on the weekend or whatever, and people that are real serious about advancing their skills. And, if they're looking at it in terms of maybe needing this as a life-saving skill someday. And it's definitely putting in the work. That's for sure.
Heath, as an instructor, you were there for the 2-day class. I'm just going to kind of keep on the dates here, because that was one of the questions that I got coming back as I was talking to people, right? I have my normal day job. I put in 35 hours that week, and then I go and train for 30 plus 35 hours in 3 days, put in 70 hours in a week. As an instructor, going from the 2-day to the 3-day, what's your thoughts on that? I mean, were you, besides just getting extra runs potentially, just giving out the information and working with students, what's your thoughts there?
So it seems like it would be easier to fill a 2-day class than a 3, because a lot of people can just come out for the weekend. They don't have to take time off of work to be able to do it. But there really is so much information, and you're trying to teach it, allow students to rep it, and then apply it. And in that context, 2 days it's a struggle to try and get through that information. And there's certain things that always end up left out, like in the 2-day class, we just weren't able to get low light implemented into that. And I feel there's a lot to be learned from doing CQB with low light. And it forces people to slow down. So it just adds another layer, essentially, so that, after doing the 2-day class, they decided to, we tried it, but it's too much information to try and put into a 2-day class. So they ended up deciding to bump it up to 3.
And I will say you're a trooper. With the amount of time that you put into helping AI with guys and the classes and stuff, it's definitely not overlooked, right? So I definitely appreciate that.
Well, thank you, sir.
So going into the class, you were supposed to be an AI. We'll kind of put a little caveat on this. We had a special 3-day class for us at this one, as we unfortunately had some students that had to drop out prior to the class for various reasons. So it ended up having 2 teams of 2, so 4 students. And Kevin and you, which Kevin is your CQB partner for a lot of this, ended up taking the class as well. So you go from AIs to taking this. What was that like, kind of last minute in your head?
Well, for starters, I always have a base level of gear I bring with me no matter what. And, thankfully I had that with me, because otherwise I would have been, it would have been a little interesting. But no, it was nice. It was like, well, we had 4 students that were supposed to come out that all had, different stuff come up, and they weren't able to make it out. So, to run a class with only 2 teams seems, it's good for everybody because they're going to be able to get more reps and stuff. But at the same time, they lack the opportunity to be able to watch as many runs from other students, see how different people handle problems and stuff. And me and Kevin have been a little bit rusty. So it was a perfect opportunity for me and him to hop in and try and get back on track and square things up. So, and it was good. I enjoyed it.
And you guys always say too, right? It's continuing education. trying this stuff, putting it through the ringer, and staying sharp on it. So, that's definitely, and you got to take a class. Perishable.
Go.
A quick note on that perishable. So we did, which I'll be doing an ACR on. We did a pistol class, Heath. You were out there and helping with that one over at Front Sight. And I haven't shot my pistol since the first Pistol 1 class that Front Sight did back in the spring.
Oh,
so
from this past Saturday?
Yeah. And you talk about a perishable skill, right? So, September, I think it was May that you guys had that class. So, 4 months or so, and not shooting pistol and just been focusing on CQB and rifle work. It is downhill quick.
Definitely.
Downhill quick.
And, pistol skills translate to rifles, but not vice versa. So, if you're only going to pick one, spending that time focused on pistol is definitely the better way to go.
So, how the class structure works is there's a lot of classroom time discussing the different procedures, and we talk about shapes and room procedure, door procedure, all the different procedures that make up the CQB package. Hours of classroom before we truly start to go and practice a lot of this and start getting runs in. Joel, when you've done a lot of training, what did you think about that as far as a lot of instruction and notes before just going out and doing and going flying by the hip? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, for me, I was all about it. I think that doctrine is like critical to all this stuff, and having like a well thought out, well formulated something that you can articulate well and consistently, and use to refer to later on, and as a way to maintain a consistency across classes and stuff, maintaining the same kind of instruction, the same kind of techniques. I think that's huge, and it give you kind of like a baseline to work off of. I think that's fantastic. I loved it.
And Heath, from a teacher's perspective and student, I want to kind of get both of yours. Do you feel that it's hard to keep these students engaged a lot as you're seeing it from that side, and even as a student has hundreds of hours in the same package?
So, it seems like the type of people that come out to a CQB class are there to actually learn. It's not a go fast class. So people, a lot of people have that expectation of it, but it's about moving through a structure with purpose and procedures so that I don't die. So the majority, I don't know that I've seen more than a couple of people go through one of the CQB classes and not take egregious amounts of notes and really spend the time paying attention and focused on it. And I mean, even this last class, and the one before at Alliance with Joe, I'm still taking notes. I've been through the class before. I helped teach the class at, with DE, and, it's one of those things that it seems like the more times I go through it, the more notes I take, because I find there's more specific things I need to focus on that the first go around, I didn't take as many notes because I was like, I'm sure I'll remember that. And that's the stuff that tends to fade. Sure. So across the board between me and other students that have been in class with me and stuff, I haven't really seen much in the lines of lack of interest or, trouble holding people's attention. And it's a very information heavy, it's front loaded for both courses, DE's and Joe's. So, but once you get that out of the way, there's only minor talking points throughout the rest of the class, which is nice too. I'd rather get it out of the way when I'm fresh, when I'm early in the morning, as opposed to waiting until 2 a.m. to, oh, hey, let's brief on this. So when I'm half asleep and tired and worn out. So it seems like that tends to be how it works out well.
And so one of the cool things having a smaller class is we were able to get a lot accomplished on this one. Out of the 6 now that are taking it, right? You, Kevin, have had a lot of hours into it. I've had a lot this year. Joel was just exposed to it. We had another guy that was just exposed to it in Alliance. And then we had one of the I believe he was a Patreon member for Practically Tactile and took another DE class. He was brand new to it. So they were able to get him spun up pretty quick on a lot of this stuff. Gave him a lot of attention, which was kind of cool. But was able to get him spun up, and then we can start doing practice, dry runs with this stuff. We start with flow drills and go through all the different, carry and ready positions, high carry, low carry, low ready, high ready, retention, front sling, rear sling. So we go through all that, clear out the rifles, as Jesse and everybody, and I've even heard Joe say this, turn them into broomsticks, basically, to start going into the shoot house and practicing this stuff. Joel, there was obviously a difference between Alliance and how we practice inside the shoot house shapes. We'll talk about shapes for a minute here. We have the 4 basic shapes: L, bottom of a T, top of a T, and a 4-way, which is basically a bottom of a T with an extra 0 on there, right? So it's very easy to do. So at Alliance, we go into the shoot house and practice and just find it organically within the shoot house, the outdoor shoot house. DE does something completely different, which I thought was amazing when I was there. They have, I'll call it stations, right? Where they had the definitive shape that they made out of mats in one area. Like, this is an L, like it looks like a L, period, point blank, done. Then you go to another station, and now you're in a hallway where you see it, but it's more organic now inside a structure. And then you go into a room where they make it out of dead space or furniture, and they start to create shapes. How did you like that aspect to it? Were you able to see things better? Did you say, well, this is kind of redundant? Kind of, what was your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I thought doing it as a round robin kind of deal like that was fantastic. It emulates kind of that crawl, walk, run formula with training, and it really breaks things down. I felt like in the first time around at APD, I was still feeling a little foggy on kind of some of the technical elements of the shapes and what I was seeing, and I felt like doing it that way, where you're running it through a totally sterile format, like you're saying, with creating the shapes in a totally sterile environment, and then progressing to, here's an example of how it would look real world in a hallway. Here's an example of how it would look real world with furniture or whatever. I thought that was a great way to slowly ramp into, what to expect. I think it helped too, obviously, having that experience with APD already. But yeah, this really just drove it home, and I thought it was a great way to present all that information.
Yeah, and another cool part to this, everybody that was there, right, that helps, Heath and Kevin, you guys normally help AI, but there's Tim, there's Jesse and Nick, and they all, you guys have tons and tons of hours into this package, and you're all on the same page, which is really cool. And that hallway at MTAC in Muncie, it's just a crazy, weird 4-way hallway, that you can use. So it is cool to see that. The other cool aspect to it, for those of us who've had this before, then they start, I don't want to say nitpicking in a way, but start adding layers of complexity to certain shapes or different ways of looking at it to build off of just a basic class, right? Which I thought took this class to a whole nother level for me, personally. Heath, as you guys were going through this, being that you and Kevin have gone through this so many times, did you like having that complexity, or did you want it kind of broken? You wanted to be broken down to the basic and kind of build back up? Kind of where were you at with that?
So you're talking about like Joel was with the shapes, with the shape breakdown in the rooms?
Well, even just the shapes. Did you guys, so like DE was adding different things, like here's a basic 4-way to us, but here you can think of it this way or do it this way a little differently than just a basic L or a basic bottom of a T. It's because we've gone through the basics so many times.
So at the end of the day, when you actually look at how buildings are constructed, houses, commercial buildings, all that stuff, you really don't run across any of those. I don't want to say any. You really don't run across as many true angles, right? Like, so there's always a bit of gray area where you've got like a little bit of an offset hallway, or you have, so I like how they break that down and add some of those extra layers, given that exposure to it. Now in that shapes part of it, me and Kevin didn't run through that. We ended up just kind of wandering around helping you guys out and stuff. And to be honest, we probably should have, because yikes, there was a couple of rough spots in that. But but no, I think it helps to see it within a room. I think that's the biggest way that how they changed how that's done. Like Joel said, that round robin style where they bump you around to stations and expose you to the one shape and then the next. By doing it that way, like when I first started going out to APD for CQB stuff, I found that I could see all my shapes when it came to hallways and doors and stuff like that even within that room. But when you started adding the furniture and stuff, I went, wait, how am I seeing this inside that room? Where am I finding a top of a T made out of furniture? And by breaking it down the way that they do, I think it helps ramp students up faster to where now they can get on board, they can start progressing faster because they're actually seeing those shapes and not having to spend so much time kind of trying to figure it out on the fly.
Sure. And so then we did the shapes, and then we'd start doing room procedures and door procedures. And that was another thing that was, kind of bounced back and forth, a little different than APD and stuff like that, as far as how the package. And it's always that chicken before the egg, that we've heard so many times. Do we show you guys door procedure before room procedure? Do we show you room procedure before door? How do you get into the room without knowing door, type of thing? Then we started getting into some basic runs, and kind of going through there. Day 2 starts picking up quite a bit more, and day 3 was the fun day for me. Joel, when coming out of APD, you said, fog and things like that. What was there, like one thing you were truly trying to get out of going through all this, or did you have like an aha moment, like it just unlocked Pandora's box of everything as they were going through this stuff?
I mean, one struggle that I just in general with CQB that I had with trying to understand it and with training that I had in the past and all that kind of stuff was being overwhelmed by the angles of exposure, which I now have a term for thanks to this training that I didn't have before. Before it was, holy crap, I'm just dead. Like there's just everywhere there are threats everywhere, and either you're, John Wick, or you're going to die going into these situations. And I think the biggest thing that I was looking for was a solution to that. And I felt like it was totally adequately explained in a way that I understood, like, okay, there's a lot of these other techniques that I've seen and, experiences I've had with force on force, whatever. My problem was always with like over penetration, and you're opening yourself up to all these angles of exposure that are there, and you have to. There is a process for that, and so I felt like this gave me way more confidence in facing some of those kinds of challenges, and a way to work really ultimately much slower in the simplest way to describe it. It's really you work much slower. You're not over penetrating these spaces and opening up yourself to all these other threats that you can't see from the threshold or wherever you're starting from. So I thought it was cool.
And those of you that are listening, from other ACRs, we talked about this, but I'll kind of briefly touch on an angle of exposure is basically somewhere you can receive fire from, whether it be, behind a mattress, a couch, open door, closed door, other rooms, things of that nature. And in this package of Strongwall, we always want to cancel that. We always want to have an angle of attack, we call it, or one of our guns pointed that way. Unfortunately, sometimes, as Heath, you pointed out, it's not all sterile. It's not all very one or two angles. Sometimes you'll have 5 or 6, so you have to try to prioritize and keep attention on that. And that's talking about later. We'll start to talk about some of the complexity of the runs on that third day, and even part of that the end of the second day, how they started adding more of those big layers onto it. Heath, what about you? So you and Kevin, have been working together for a while. I know you mentioned before and things like that. You guys were at APD with us and coming in here. Is there something that got you guys an aha moment, or did something unlock your Pandora's box or unlock more information that you really haven't thought of or got out of it before, that first or second day?
Well, so the shoot house at MTech is far more. It's not so the APD shoot house was built as a training shoot house, 100%. So things are, the rooms, the hallways, everything's oversized to allow people space to be able to move. And by doing it at MTech, which is more true to commercial construction, you run into more complexity, and they have regular furniture, things like that. So yeah, I mean, it definitely, with the complicated runs that we ended up doing, there was a whole lot that it was like, wow, man, that was, really a complicated run. I mean, so it forced us to push a little bit harder and make sure we were still staying in line, essentially. And, I thought it ended up making for a fantastic class. I had a lot of fun, and more on day 3 than 1 and 2, but even still, like, even with the amount of time I've spent doing it, there was a lot of small learning points along the way to make that to where it was still a very educational class on my side as well.
Yeah, and so talking about that, right? You have Kevin, who's been your shoot house partner, your CQB partner for a while now. Joel, being new to this, you had your partner at APD, and I had Ernie, who's always, who's gone a couple classes with me, 2 other ones prior to this. Not saying who was better or anything like that, but the cool thing about this package, and Heath, you've talked about this, is you can get the basic knowledge, get the principles, get the procedures done, and you can really just be tossed in with anybody and all pretty much be on the same page. So, Joel, give me your thoughts on that. What was the feeling like, going through it with your partner at APD, and then going through this one with me? I mean, was there any apprehension there? Was that something kind of that it was easy to get connected, if you will? Was there some learning points in there that we had to go through? Give me your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I felt like I just dropped right in. I mean, there was no everything, in combination with the fact that I've learned this stuff once, and now it's like I've seen this movie before or whatever. It's like that whole process was seamless. And I felt like any questions that I might have had about some real small little things, about one little detail here or there, got cleared up pretty quickly, working with you, since you've got, some more time on that stuff. And, but like, in terms of like trying to communicate with my partner and, all that kind of stuff, like everything was seamless in terms of the doctrine and stuff surrounding all that. So it felt pretty good.
And then Heath, you and Kevin have been teaching a lot, together. How was it finally getting in the saddles? I just had APD and now we have D, but what was it like getting back into the saddle with your CQB partner? Do you feel that it's perishable like some of the other skills, or?
It's definitely a perishable skill. And for me and Kevin, what ended up happening was we both still had our same skill set. That wasn't what seemed to diminish in our case for some reason that neither of us have figured out. We both lost trust in the other person. And so then as the other person makes a mistake, it just validates that I shouldn't have trusted them, which then makes that problem compound and get worse. So, then we finally sat down and went, look, we just need to get this sorted out. You know the stuff. I know the stuff. We've got a ton of time doing this stuff. Why are we messing it up? And fix it. And we did, and all of a sudden it was like a light switch. Runs stopped going like crap. So it was, there's certain parts of it that definitely diminish. Seeing shapes can be affected if it's not something you keep up on. But I think the reason that, for me and Kevin, the reason that none of the other stuff seemed to be as diminished as it could be was because we were also still teaching. So we were looking for all those problems in other people. We were, searching that stuff out to where that stuff was all staying fresh. The only thing that we weren't working on was our individual partnership to maintain that trust. And at the end of the day, like, you have a job to do, I have a job to do. If you're not doing your job, or vice versa, if I'm not doing my job because I'm concerned about what you're doing, I'm the one who's dropping the ball there. So, I think definitely brought up some very valid learning points, and something I don't want to let happen again.
Yeah, and so, I was used to Ernie, so I did two with him, and the one thing I'll say is we had our pace, right? We walked, which I know everybody says was a surprise for Ernie. I mean, we literally just a slow pace walk. And then, Joel, it's the same thing, right? Just trusting your partner, as Heath said, and it's like, all right, I know Joel has this, and then Joel has this like long slinky legs and just Ricky Bobby and all.
For the record, that's Joel's regular walk. So
Well, that's the thing. I'm like, Joe, we're just gonna walk, and he's like, all right, no problem. And it's like, dude, I'm like, no, crawl.
You're one of those slow walkers. I got to get around on the street walk. Mine.
Yeah. So I don't want to say hiccups, but there's those smaller learning points, if you will, of that and the body contact, during threat doors and stuff like that, and having that light body contact, where Ernie would really push into me, but those are just things, right? You just work through, and as we're doing these dry runs and stuff, and that stuff got worked out pretty quick, and we were off to the races. I was really happy with how our runs were going and everything like that.
Yeah, I felt like we knew what needed to be done. We were on the same page in terms of shapes and a lot of the procedures and stuff. It was just ironing out a few of those little details with speed and all that stuff.
Yeah, one of the cool things, so Ernie and I, when we went to APD together, we kind of talked to each other and said, all right, we're on the same page. We don't want to talk as much, right? Less communication. And we have different cues, barrel releases, and attention on things and stuff like that during this package. And again, perishable skill, right? It was a couple months that we didn't do it. And we started kind of fumbling a little bit, because I would think he was on a shape, you thought I was on a different shape, that sort of thing. I felt, Joel, as we were going through that, right, and even that day 3, we started to really start to tone that down.
Mm-hmm.
There was one room during the third day where we go into the room, do our scan, and like we're literally just walking to the door, next problem, right? And then I'm like, hey, can we do that? We didn't call a room procedure out. And they're like, no, you guys are good. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. We're just in sync and doing what needed to be done, and then on to the next problem. So it was cool. And then part of that again is just like you said, Joel, right? It's more classes and more reps and just getting on that same page, which definitely helps. A couple things I wanted to talk about too is, especially Joel and Heath, you've been through this a lot, but Joel, with all the training and the different training that you do, accuracy standards. This came up in another ACR that I did on the APD class with Rob and Tony, who are competitive shooters, right? A-zone, which is like huge compared to accuracy standards that we're held to during these classes. Did you find a struggle? We talk about, fist size, pump and lungs, and then the smaller T-box in the face. Did you find kind of that being hard? They say we can take our time and everything like that.
It was a real kick in the nuts. I mean, I think one thing that I've found with, the 10 years of doing this stuff, no matter what, area of focus it is, anything shooting related, it is always a humbling experience. I think if you're not prepared for that, you're not doing it right, because there is always a higher level to achieve. If you think that you're just, 100% ready to go, I don't need to do this anymore or whatever, you're wrong. And I thought this was, right. It's a kick in the nuts. It's not something I'd prefer to get all the time, but it was fantastic in terms of, holding yourself to a higher standard and pushing you to get better. It certainly has made me rethink a lot of, flat range stuff that I do and the standards that I'm holding myself to, and the granular level of detail that you get to with holdovers and all that kind of stuff. It was huge,
especially with the ACOG.
With the telescope.
Listening, some of us were using a 2.5. Was it 2.5, Joel?
Three power. The TA-33.
So some of us are using a 3 power ACOG, while the rest of us are using a red dot. And some of those targets, man, they were what, 2 feet in front of us. I mean, the muzzle was in their face, and it's like, no, I don't need a holdover. Let me just put the muzzle right where I need to go.
That was outside the glass completely. Yeah.
Some of those, they talk about when we do that violence of action, or we do the room procedure, things like that. It's it's expecting something to be there, but surprised that it's not, right? We hear that a lot from Joe and the guys over at DE. And though I wasn't surprised, I was more surprised how close they were. I'm like, wow, I've never had a target this close, but hey, it could happen, right? So some of those are kind of fun. And again, it was just a fun class. Heath, you talked about that before too. It was truly a fun class that we had. I mean, all the guys at DE are great, and a lot of the students and stuff like that kind of make it that way. And Kelly's there, which, you know, always makes it for a fun class. So, talking about the accuracy standards for both of you, I want to start with Heath. Once you go through the APD class, the DE classes, right, the accuracy standards, how did you change your training? Did you change anything as far as your own? You know, we go to a lot of these flat range classes and defensive classes, right, and we see the silhouette, and some of the T-box areas or the chest cavity areas are so big compared to what standards we're held to. Is there anything that you changed with your training as far as your own accuracy? Do you do different type of targets, that sort of stuff?
So I don't change up targets, but I still try and hold myself to that same accuracy standard. You know, so even if the class I'm going to isn't holding that, I try and hold that for myself. If that means I need to slow down a little bit so I actually get good hits, I would much rather take that extra, because we're talking about slowing down. It's not like I'm just stopped and stationary waiting to take a shot because I'm not getting the right angle. It's a fraction of a second difference to make a good hit versus a fast hit. And so for me, that was something that changed with priority. Same thing with safeties. You know, safety stays on until sights are on target, because when I first started going out to these kind of classes, I noticed, and it was pointed out by Joe, there's a trend. People who flip their safeties off as that gun comes up tend to shoot more no shoots by a large margin. So, you know, those were the two things I really tried to work on for myself, was holding that same accuracy standard and safety manipulations. Regardless of the target, I know where that hit zone is. Even if it's just a silhouette, I can look at that target and go, that's where that eye box is. That's that high thoracic chest cavity area, and try and keep it there. Do I always? No, you know, because just like with CQB, like the shooting is a diminishing skill too. Mm-hmm. So, you know, that's something that we've tried to push students to hold themselves accountable. And there's always a ton of pushback of, no, man, I got that shot. If I shot him there, he'd still be dead. Like, yeah, you're right. He would be of sepsis in 2.5 weeks. But if that's the level you want to hold yourself to, I can't force you to, you know, so I'm just a lot more particular individually now.
Sure.
So
yeah, there was one target where it's a guy that has, you know, the gun out pointed at you, so the hands and the gun are blocking that high thoracic area, and I Robin Hood that shit. I got my round was right in the pipe, and they're like, failed to neutralize. I'm like, that gun ain't working. Neutralize my ass. He can't shoot me anymore. You know, but again, it's like the high standards, and I've talked about this in other ACRs, because when it comes time to do this stuff in real life, as Joe says, and you know, Joe Wire and everybody, you know, planet motherfucker, right? Like, shit's gonna happen. When it does, you want to be perfect, but things are gonna fly off the rails a little bit. So if you train to be perfect, when it comes time for this to go, you're not off, type of thing. Joel, being new then at this, going forward, do you feel that your training is going to change a little bit as far as some of this stuff?
Yeah, I think I'll start incorporating a little bit different targets on my own time. And Heath makes a good point about, like, when you're in other classes and stuff, there's that training is there for you. You're not worried about what if another student next to you is shooting faster or whatever, that kind of stuff. No, that you're there for you. And so if you want to hold yourself to a higher standard and a smaller target area or whatever, and it, that's a great way to keep improving those skills. I think when I get doped for a gun and stuff in the past, it was typically like, all right, here's my 10-yard holdover. That's like my close range holdover, and probably not, maybe get like a 3-yard, but it really wouldn't be much beyond that. And I think I'll pay a lot closer attention to some of that kind of stuff. And just be, when I see, shots that are outside the target area, really be, slowing things down, try that again, make sure that we're doing this correctly, because they make a big point in Joe's class and in DE, like you're saying, if we can't do this with all the time in the world and, no shot timer coming out or nothing, how can you expect to rise to the occasion if that would happen for real?
Yeah, and the targets are really interesting, right? And I agree, Joel. I actually ordered some realistic targets, and the targets we use, there may be a target that have 2 people in it, right? But 2 different sizes, and different weapons in their hands or no weapons, things of that nature. And one of the things that I was struggling with at the beginning of doing this training is that holdover with the rifle. Setting it to a 25-yard 0.36 or whatever. You don't have a silhouette with markings to cheat the holdover. These are realistic, close, whatever, that you have to know your holdover at all distances, right? You just have to know. And then with those targets at this class being so close, some of those, it's like you are just off because you need to hold above their head maybe an inch or 2 to get that holdover. Especially, Heath and I have those huge Unity mounts. Sometimes the holdover is pretty big. The Space Needle, as Gary would say from Front Sight, which I have to say, Gary, if you're watching this, you have a Space Needle now, so there, it works. I want to go into day 3 now. So we start getting a little bit more complex runs towards the end of day 2. We start doing threat door procedure or threat opening procedures, things of that nature. The runs are starting to go from maybe 3 to 5 minutes. Now we're starting to open up the entire shoot house at MTAC. And those of you who haven't been to MTAC, I mean, it's a really cool facility that they have. There's kitchen, living room, 5 rooms, a bathroom. We call it the church, or another big opening room. There's a little maintenance area, which I was not expecting to be open, that all of a sudden was open, right? It talks about paying attention to your surroundings. A small laundry room, another small office. I mean, there's a lot of room. So towards the end of day 2, things start opening up, and now runs are getting 10, 15, 20 minutes long, which is fantastic, I feel. We start day 3 with low light, which is what I was looking forward to. I brought my night vision and everything. I was ready to go. So they talk about low light, do a lecture on it, which I thought was very interesting. Every time I hear it, I've heard very similar things, but it's always cool to see it in practice. Joel, with the training that you've had with low light, give me some insight on what you thought about how their low light lecture went and kind of what you learned about rifle light, if there was anything new that you learned or eye-opening, anything like that.
I mean, in terms of technique, there were some different ways of using the light that I haven't really seen before. And in terms of using the spill, as you scan and then as you come into the hot spot, rather than just focusing your attention to the hot spot. I thought that was a smart way to think about it. And obviously I don't know if you want to get into it now. So I saw tons of stuff in terms of just the equipment being used and the pros and cons to some of these lights and the output on them and all that kind of stuff. Definitely made me rethink some of my choices on that stuff.
Yeah, and Heath, I'll let you touch on some of this too. So we'll first kind of go into the lecture part, and then we'll talk about that because that's always very interesting. And my ACR I did with Tony and Rob at APD, this came up, and they changed a lot of their equipment, which was kind of funny after seeing it. Right, all these ads and got the best light in the world or whatever, and then in practical use, is it really what you're looking for? But in the lecture portion, we talk about, the batteries and the spill and the flood and all that kind of stuff. As gone through this so many times, what do you feel is most important about low light when it comes to rifle or pistol and shoot house? Give me like two big key takeaways that you always get from it.
Well, so one thing to tag off of what Joel said about using the spill as opposed to the hotspot. So we're looking in a room. Is everything necessarily in that room need a gun pointed at it? Because if I'm searching a house, if it's my own house, what if my kids were downstairs? Do I want to be pointing guns at my kids? If I catch my kid with the spill, at no point did I point a gun at my children. Mm-hmm. So that gives me the ability to PID, identify whatever I'm pointing a light at with a reasonable margin of error for that being something that doesn't need a gun pointed at it. And, but to me, the other big thing is if I'm doing something, my light should be on. If I'm looking for something, the light should be on. If I'm moving, my light should be on. If I need to search, navigate, all those things, there's a whole bunch of things that light should be on for. So if my light doesn't have a clicky cap to where I can turn it on and leave it on, I have zero interest in that light. And I know that's more gear related, but at the same time, it's not, because a lot of people with clickies don't turn their light on. They choose to run some sort of momentary thing. And, you see a lot of guys walking around in the dark because people shoot at lights. Well, I'm a role player for a lot of that stuff. And I can tell you that a good quality light pointed in my face makes it very, very difficult for me to shoot at it. So, so that whole they'll shoot the light kind of a thing is one of those frustrating topics that you haven't had quality lights pointed in your face very often, because if so, you would not be making that statement. So, and all right, so three things: searching with the spill, leaving that light on, and slow down. When it's nighttime, you can't move as fast as you can in the daytime. So when I'm searching, when I'm scanning a room, when I'm looking at what's in that environment, I need to really slow that down so that I can pick up all that information that I'm seeing, because I can't pick it up in a peripheral view because it's dark. I don't have peripheral. I only have what that light is covering. So if I'm not slowing that scan down to where I can pick up those things in that environment, then I'm really not seeing anything, and I'm just walking around blind. I would say those would probably be my three things. I wouldn't say that I learn anything new with low light in that context, but it reinforces it every single class that I've done in low light, that's the right way to be doing it.
Yeah, I actually, it's funny you say some of this stuff. So I have a guy that I work with, and we've been having a discussion the past couple of days on lights.
So So did he buy an O light and he only runs it in strobe?
I was going to say he had a light that started with an O and ended with a T. You know, the Gucci version, I would say. And you know, we're
They make one of those.
Well, yeah, he thinks so. And we were comparing that towards, you know, he was asking me about a rifle light, and you know, of course, I'm a big rain guy, cloud defensive rain, just because of the performance, you know, and I've put it through the test, right? Yep, and I got my owl and my rain on that one. But
Oops,
breaking shit.
Well, now that one's not in reach.
But
all right, I got to back up.
So we were talking about that, right? And the brightness and how long lasts. And that's, you know, starting to get into gear. I mean, that's huge. And part of the discussion was he does airsofting a lot, or airsoft, not soft, airsoft. And Heath, we've talked about this a little bit too. You know, I always think it'd be kind of cool to do an airsoft event just to unlock some of these, you know, complexes or you know, bases that you can't normally get to, and kind of just peel off and practice TQB in real world life type thing and real buildings. But he was asking me about the light, right? And I told him light on. If it's nighttime, right, and I'm in a building and I'm doing stuff, lights on, the thing doesn't come off unless I'm, you know, behind my partner, right? I don't want to backlight my partner and things of that nature. And we got into this big, I don't want to call it argument, but discussion about on and off, on and off. He's like, well, what about sneaking and this and that? I'm like, all right, well, real life is different than gaming at airsoft. One, and I gave that analogy that we talk about in class, right? I'm like, all right, walk down the hall and put your hand up, and then go like this, and then put your hand up, and then go like this, and then put your hand up, go like this. I'm like, that is what you're doing by lights on, off, on, off, on, off. Just keep the damn thing on. And then, you know, he talks about, what about sneaking? I'm like, that's what night vision's for. Got that, right? You know, but once you to put the superiority clock that we talk about, right, and the momentum on a structure and everything that we talk about in class, once you reach open into that door and they know you're there, it's time to do work. Just get the fucking light out and go, right? Just do your work.
So, you know, on that, and this isn't O-Light specific, because it is in the case because we're talking about an O-Light, but a lot of companies out there do this too, where that projected number, their lumen number, like say it's a 1500 lumen O-Light, you know, it's not 1500 lumens for the entire life of the battery. On most O-Lights, it's only 1500 lumens for about 90 seconds. Then that lumen output drops down to about 600, 500 or 600. So, you know, and it's that way with a lot of the lights that are out there, until you start to get into really quality lights. You know, we'll put Streamlight in that category. Sure, but Surefire, Mod Light, Cloud, they hold pretty true to their numbers of this is a 1400 lumen light for 45 minutes. Then it drops down. So, I mean, there's a big difference in that. So for somebody who is running a light that tanks after 90 seconds, yeah, the experience he has from airsoft, he probably doesn't see the benefit in the same way of if he would have had a more reputable company's product.
Sure.
You know,
sure. And going, I mean, Joel knows this more than anybody too, going down the rabbit hole with gear and stuff like that, right? You can go down that, and I don't want to spend too much time, but there's definitely a big difference in it, right? And there's plenty of videos out there and stuff like that. And I wanted to do I told him, I said, well, his dad has a farm up in northern Milwaukee, Ozaki County. I said, well, let's go out to the farm one night, bring the lights, and let's see what we could see, right? Because the spill, I think, is always a big part of it too. And, you know, that was very evident, you know, and Joel, you said that, so we'll kind of segue into that, right? It's very evident the differences in lights. You know, there's guys that will have pistol lights. on their rifle. Rob, I was talking to him with the APD ACR that we did, and he got a dedicated rifle light, right? But there's guys that put pistol lights on the rifles and other quality of lights. So, Joel, what is your thought now? I mean, doing APDs and now DEs with light and the differences and what you can see, what you can't see. What did that do for you?
I mean, just putting so many different brands and models and stuff head to head, and just getting up on the catwalk and watching the performance and everything. I thought that was pretty. If ever there was a way to just blatantly say which one is going to be superior or whatever, that was a pretty good way of doing that.
And that would be Heath's house.
And
I heard it and I thought it was muted. Otherwise, I
he
would have
literally
muted
lives on the track. The
I'm
track
about-
runs through his garage.
I'm about 40 yards, roughly.
So loud. Anyways, all right, continue.
Yeah, I mean, there's huge differences between them, and I know we're getting a little brand specific on this stuff. I wouldn't even say that it's necessarily just by this company or whatever. It's more a realization that like a light is not a light is not a light, and they have different pros and cons. They have different purposes, right? Rifle versus pistol lights. The reflectors that they use for those lights are all different and have different purposes. Nothing is truly like a one size fits all. Just buy this and you're off.
There's a one size fits all.
And just realizing that there's a multitude of reasons one might pick one tool over another and for a specific job.
Yeah, and that was, I think a lot of us at Muncie were running very similar lights. One guy had an in-force light there, right, and that got quickly changed out.
30 minutes.
But even at Alliance, right, we had a lot more guys there, and it's very interesting if you ever get a chance to see this, come into this class, come into a different class where they're doing low light, it's evident, Joel, like you said, right? It's just blatantly obvious what does what for how long and all that stuff. It's very interesting. And one of the things that always astonished me was the temperature. They talk about the temperature, the color of the light, right?
And that's exactly where I wanted to go with it.
Right? Huge. And there's some of these targets that are placed behind stuff, right, where the temperature helps pick up certain things on that target, because of the color of clothes that target's wearing, whatever the case may be. We're an indoor shoot house, so we didn't really have outside factors playing into a lot of this stuff. Like some outdoor ranges with dew or fog or pollen or whatever,
or heavy rain. With very dark walls and no ceiling that you can umbrella off of, and gravel on the ground, so no floor you can shine off of. Like,
Joe,
APD is really a good place to test out lights.
Yep. And Joe, if you're listening, maybe you are, maybe you're not, but anybody who knows Alliance, dome. Corey, I hope you're hearing this. Dome. We need a dome out there. Someone's throwing a bottle at Corey now.
Probably Joe.
But yeah, it is. But so indoors, right, and having some of these targets, the light, the spill, and you guys talked about this, Joel, right? You don't focus on the hot spot, and they really pushed that and did some demos in the classroom before I went out there. You're searching with the spill of the light, because by the time your spill gets somewhere, right, your eyes are, that hot spot's getting to that target, if you will. So you're not outrunning your light. Slowing down is a big, and they talked and preached that. They preach that throughout the whole class, but even in at night, and they always say too, night you have two different students. You have the students that go extreme Ricky Bobby, or you have students, right, that go to sloth mode and slow way down. And I felt, Joel, that you and I, we started to slow down a little bit more during the night. And I felt that we were able to catch a lot of things. Now, throughout the days, first and second day, Joel and Heath and Kevin, we all ran slick, right? We just had our rifles, we had a mag in our pocket, or whatever, and just ran slick. But that third day, it was full kit time because I wanted to run night vision, right? Wanted to get, we have night vision, so let's use that. Running those at night, Joel, with kit, let's say, and running during the day without, do you feel that your kit ever hindered you during the class or anything like that for those who want to run kit during classes or anything?
I felt okay with it. I've got a lot of time with it, and I spent a lot of time with like just designing that stuff and screwing around with it and stuff. But I think that, like, in terms of like a student considering this class and whatever, that sort of stuff, I would not, for my first class, I would not get real wrapped around the axle about like having a full kit and all that kind of stuff. I would probably just run the whole thing slick and focus, not let that. The gear is important, and you have to put it through its paces in order to expose weaknesses and all that deficiencies with your setup. But there's a lot going on, and to be fighting your gear at the same time is really not a good recipe for success.
And to preference that, so we were at Muncie, Indiana at MTAC, which is an indoor shoot house, UTM. So it's UTM on paper, so we didn't have to run kit. Other shoot houses, live fire, such as APD, where we were before, that you have to run ballistic plates and a ballistic helmet just for safety purposes. Plus, if you showed up in too slick of stuff, you get that disappointed Joe look too.
Yeah.
Which
is funny. I've heard those stories, but I've shown up in blue jeans and a slick plate carrier, my helmet, nothing.
I want you to show up in
and Joe's like,
next time and see what he says.
And Joe's like, "You ready?" I'm like, "Yep." He's like, "All right, hop online." And
God,
so I gave that to Ernie, and that advice to Ernie before he went out, and he was like, "Dude," he yelled at me. He was like, "Go get your shit. What do you think this is?"
That's funny.
But
so let's talk about Heath. Go ahead, Heath. Go ahead.
No, you're good.
Heath, I wanted you to kind of talk about the complexity of runs. So I heard a lot during class, and again, I want to preference this. We were able to get a lot more complex runs and built off of, again, because of the number of students and being spun up. So may not be like that for every anatomy of structures class. But we started to get really complex runs, and the guys, Jesse and Tim and Nick, were all building off of stuff that they have run into at Canton and stuff like that. And those who don't know, there's other things in Canton through APD and stuff like that in a commercial facility. So they started setting up runs were problems that they were exposed to later on in their training that not at the beginning. So we got to see that more from the beginning. Heath, what were your thoughts on that complexity? Do you think it was a good fit for where we were at? Did you struggle with it?
For the students that were out there, it seemed like it was a good fit. It sounded like there was a little bit of talk like, we might be pushing some boundaries, but, let's give it to them and see how they do. And, the runs I watched, I thought everybody did really well. With the level of complexity that was set up, I thought those runs went far beyond my expectations, especially for the one student who it was his first time out there, first type of that class. And for myself, those are the kind of runs I love. I don't really want to go to any class, let let alone a shoot house class, get a pat on the back and like, hey man, yeah, great job. Go get ready to do it again. Like, I'm not learning anything out of that.
Yeah,
So
like I said, if it's not a humbling experience, like you're doing something wrong. Like,
yeah, there has to be failures. If you don't have failures, you're really not learning anything. I don't ever want to be the top shooter in a class, because if I did, then I picked the wrong class. I picked a class that was beneath the skill set that I should have been working on. So, that's kind of how I look at that.
Joel, being obviously your second class, kind of, and I felt we did really well, but did you think you were outrunning your headlights doing some of these runs? And you talk about failures too. I mean, being a humbling experience, kind of tell me a little bit more about that, kind of what this exposed for. You don't have to go into exact detail with shooting hostages, but
you want to talk about that? You weren't supposed to say that.
Me? No, you didn't do that.
No,
But
somebody did.
did you think you were outrunning your headlights? Did it expose it? Did you feel that you were failing more because of that, or just being pushed?
I thought that we were right at that. I thought the instructors, Nick and Jesse and Tim, everybody, they had a great handle on like kind of where we're at and tailoring based on that, based on problems that they saw or whatever, that kind of stuff. I felt like it was, I've always heard it described in terms of like trying to climb a ladder, and you just keep going, you keep upping the speed or the complexity or whatever it is you're trying to do until you miss that next rung, and now you step back down to that next rung just underneath it, and then slowly build back up again until you can keep climbing the ladder. And so I thought we were right on that edge. And another great thing about like MTAC, where we could use UTMs and all that stuff, in terms of safety, there certainly was no, you don't have to have that concern rolling around in the back of your mind that you would have doing live fire. So I thought it was great.
Yeah, and when we say complexity too, I just want to kind of preference that a little bit. When it's opening up more angles of exposure and different layouts within the house, opening all of the rooms, things of that nature, opening up. MTAC has, which we all know it as like the catch-all area, right? Never ever is the catch-all area ever have been in play. And then all of a sudden the yellow tape is gone, right? Now we're putting targets back there, and you have to search all the dead space. So that opened up way more angles into certain rooms, and there was one run, I think it was the second to last, or maybe even the last, right? We're in the church, which is a big room in the middle of MTAC, and the maintenance area is off to one side, right? And then they put some furniture there. So one guy is engaging in a target through a door into the maintenance area, and the other partner has to try to figure out how to get into that gunfight and furniture here, and you're kind of going back and forth. And some of us aren't as tall as Joel, so we're trying to put your gun above furniture and stuff like that. So it really makes you start to think outside of the box a little bit. And so when we talk about complexity, that's a big part of it, is a lot more angles, a lot more organic shapes, and different ways you can take it. Doesn't mean it's necessarily wrong. Where we saw students take certain rooms with two L's and a T, and you could do it as a bottom of a T and the top of a T. There's different ways of doing it. And then they started talking more about pushing the problems in front of you. So when you go into a room and there's a lot of problems, try to take that where they're all in front of you. It just allows us to keep more angles of attack, more guns towards the problems in front of us. Push all those exposures together. So that was a lot different than just a basic one that we've done before, and how they explain that, which
I think if I had been dumped into that as my first class, it would have kind of inhibited learning, because it would be to a point where you're just thrown into something so deep that now you're just frustrated and you're clueless as to what's going on.
Yeah, and that's why that class is not normally set up that way. It ended up, lucky that for everybody who showed up that, it worked out to where they could do that. And, we all got to push ourselves individually, which was really nice. Like I get frustrated at times when I go to a class and, it's like you're leaving a lot of people behind because they're not able to keep up. But at the same time, they go, well, this is the curriculum. We're just rolling forward. Check the box down the line. And, so I like when I go to a class and they see everybody's ready to move on or needs to spend more time and remediate some of that stuff to make sure that people are getting the most out of it. Like if I went to a CQB class and all we ended up getting to was room, door procedure, room procedure, and shapes, but everybody thoroughly understood it, I would be far happier than, well, we got through, this whole list of stuff, but nobody understands anything, so I appreciate their ability to tailor to students.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I've talked about in other ACRs with defense, DE, defensive elements, is their ability to tailor the class to the student base. And I think they do a very, very good job of that. Sure, are there bullet points on the class that you want to hit, but if the students aren't there yet, there's no reason to move to the next one, right? Because you can start to outrun the headlights, as they say. So they do a very good job of tailoring that. I felt that they did that again in this class. And again, like I've referenced this before, we've got into these complex things and some of the other things because of how small it was and how everybody's there. Doesn't mean it's always like that. They could do another class and 10 of the 12 guys have had this package before. There's a chance that we could get this complexity again, and there might be a chance the 2 new guys just aren't spun up enough to do that. We don't want, we want them to still learn. Joel, and you kind of talked about that, you start outrunning the headlights and now you can't learn anymore. And there's no reason for that. I want to start talking a little bit here about people that are taking the class, and I appreciate you guys taking the time with me tonight. And I don't want to take too much of your time, but doing this now, and both of you are instructors in AIs, and you've seen a lot of students, you've taken a lot of classes yourselves. Joel, I'll start with you. What type of person do you think should take this class? And what I mean by that is everybody hears that I go to CQB and like, oh, you want to be a SWAT guy, and far from that. Totally, what they do in the movies are not what we do, but they may not understand. So I want to try to help people understand what type of people should take this and why. Do you?
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about that. Like, who would I recommend take this, and at what level in your shooting experience is this going to be beneficial to you, and at what level is it going to be just too many things going on all at once to really be able to get anything valuable out of it. And yeah, that's a tough thing to say. I think my assumptions about these CQB classes going in, and the reason that I had kind of been marginal about seeking them out in the past was somewhat of a, look, I'm not on a tactical team. All this stuff is so SOP intensive and TTPs and everything that are team specific, that there's really it's a waste of time for me to do this. You'll learn all this stuff and get all spun up with a specific group of guys, and you're never going to, go do anything with these people. And so it really has little application outside of that specific context. But I think taking this class, I see how the way that it's formatted with a 2-man team, it's an excellent vehicle to teach all the techniques and the procedures. And obviously the guys talk about that in the class, how this is just the best medium to convey all this information. But the same concepts apply, whether it's you by yourself defending your home, if you, like, God forbid, have to employ a firearm, at home or in public somewhere. It helps you see the world differently, and use your tactics more effectively. So I think it certainly applies to anyone. But in terms of when someone could benefit most from this, I would say you probably want at least a fairly intermediate level of skill with flat range stuff, with just basic firearm manipulation, and marksmanship, and all the manual of arms kind of stuff. And I know, Nick, you and I kind of talked about this a little bit, driving back from the class and everything. And I just, from an instructor perspective, I just see most people can't even, take a step and engage 2 separate targets at the same time or whatever when they first get, as soon as you add one little element besides just stand there, get your sights on the target and press the trigger, like, people's brains just get scrambled when they're very new to all this stuff. And we talked about earlier too, with, like, it's hard enough when you've got all these skills already and you're thinking about, like, what are the particulars of how do I set up on this door? At what point, how do I communicate to my partner that I'm ready to take this corner, whatever it is that we're doing. So to be able to be thinking about all that stuff, and also, like, where's my bolt catch again? Like, and that kind of stuff, like, that would be a little bit pushing it. But anyone with, like, an intermediate level of skill, I think this is a great way to keep pushing yourself and expand your horizons a little bit with all this stuff. I know for me, certainly, like, there are a lot of ways where I felt like I've plateaued a little bit with some of my skills, and I see this as a way to break through to, higher levels with that stuff.
And then in Heath, obviously you've seen it from a lot of different angles, being an instructor yourself, instructing in this class before. And I mean, you're the reason I got into this. Go ahead and give me your little spiel here and how you got me going into this, and your thoughts.
So to me, I usually tell people that once you have a basic level of proficiency, I think you should get into both force on force and CQB. And a lot of people end up disagreeing with me. And most of the people I talk to about it just feel they're not ready for it. But the problem is, I feel a lot of people wait too long to get into these kind of classes, and then they develop a lot of bad habits. They buy a whole bunch of gear that they think they need because, the guy next to them on the line at the last class they went to, that's what they run, so I should be getting it. Where I feel that by going to a quality CQB class, a quality force on force class, it's going to show you the deficiencies, the places you need to work on stuff. But at the same time, going forward, it will also allow you to see through bad training, the bullshit that gets pushed in a lot of square range classes. Like out at Front Sight, we've all, me, Joel, Ernie, have all, started, now we all go to these courses, and it's helped change that curriculum in a way that we're trying to set students up for success going forward if and when they want to expand into this. So, that's kind of how I feel about it, is that one, maybe 2 rifle classes, and then take it out, see what works, see what doesn't, and reevaluate what you need to work on from there. I mean, in a CQB class, we've talked about it. There's no time limit, and there's people with you. So if you run into a problem where you need to hold, like, hang on, I can't figure out how to clear this malfunction, this is super weird, or I can't figure out how to reload my gun, like, there's somebody who's going to be there to help you out with that. I mean, my wife came out, she's never shot a rifle. Maybe I'm sure at some point I've pushed her to, but not much, because I get a lot of pushback. And she's spicy. And so, but she's come out and she's done 3 CQB classes now. And, she does really well with it. She's still not confident with the rifle. She's never taken a rifle class. She knows now that that's an area she needs to work on and try and get better at. But, it's now, I wouldn't recommend that for the majority of people. You should at least have a basic level of proficiency. But at the same time, you don't need to be John Wick before you sign up for a class like this. And that's the biggest thing I've told people in the past, is like, just get the basics down, and then you should be getting into something like this, to make sure that what you're learning is on par with where you intend to take your individual training.
Yeah, so Joel, you mentioned too, we talked about this on the ride home a little bit, and kind of a mixture of everything you guys say. I'm kind of in that same boat. Selfishly, I want people to get in, more and more people to get into this, just to open up more classes, build the community, and keep going. Ultimately, it's not just for people who want to be cool, and in my opinion, and be the SWAT guy. Is it fun? Yes. I mean, that's, it's crazy fun. It's literally putting the right Kool-Aid in my veins. But it's more so being able, and I keep stressing this to everybody I talk to, the CQB teaches people how to move in and around structures and people, which I think is probably the biggest thing. Everybody has, anybody who conceal carries needs to take training, period, point blank. Get, like you said, Heath, get some proficiency and either middle classes, that sort of thing. But to me, if you carry a gun and you do not do CQB, you are not doing it right.
Well,
because go ahead.
I mean, is there a 360-degree berm around my whole life? I mean, we all operate. We all, on a day-to-day basis, we all live in, work in structures.
Yep.
If something bad happens within that environment, you need to be able to know how to manage that space. Even if it's outdoors, a parking lot is still looked at from a CQB standpoint as a form of a structure. So, anywhere that I would have to use that gun, I need to be able to do that as efficiently as possible. So by doing a class like this, it's going to expose that. I mean, does that mean that because something happened, all of a sudden I'm, SWAT God and need to run out and save the world? No, my family and being able to support them is my priority, but what if they're with me? now that priority is being able to get them away from that environment. So if I can do that safely, I look at that as a win.
Yeah, and one of the things that I was also thinking about, doing APDs, which is live fire, and doing DEs. I was almost thinking the DE one is for anybody and everybody, right? It's UTMs, so it's not live ammo. To me, it's still, if somebody's not 100% comfortable with live ammo and still has some jitters with them, this is the perfect one to get them kind of into it, right? The safety is much more, I don't want to say controllable. That's probably a bad way of saying it, but we're not shooting live rounds.
The consequence of failure is far less.
Much lower. So, it definitely opens up your mind, and people need to be willing to fail, right? If you're not willing to fail and accept failure and get butthurt on it, this is going to destroy you, right? I've failed. I mean, I had 20, I think it was like 28 FTNs. The first class no shot hostage, though, that was a plus. But you have to fail to push yourself to get better and know where you're inefficient, where you need to work on, and push your training to that level. In every class I have failures, right? And it just keeps building and building. And we always talk about in these classes, you're never going to be perfect. You're not going to be CQB God. You're going to fail. You're going to fuck up. It's learn from it. Don't do it again. Move on. And then you push yourself, and then something else is going to get fucked up. And we talk about that in training, and I'll go back to pistol training, right? I was deficient in it for not doing it for a while, and I kept pushing myself. I didn't just, shut up shop and go home. I didn't say, well, it's not my normal gun I use, so I got to go get my other one. No, it's pushing through. It's learning and getting better with things. So I like what you all said, and it drives it home to those that are listening. It really just get some basic classes, get comfortable with knowing how to handle the gun, and the rest will come. DE also does intro classes to this stuff, which we've had out at Front Sight, which I think is another good get your feet wet with things. And like you said, Heath, Front Sight has changed some of the curriculum, if you will, or started to incorporate some things as you guys learn, right, to get you better prepared. So it's coming and taking these classes to get you going, to get into this, right, and let it bite you and go down. One last thing before we wrap things up here. 5 things that you would recommend. Somebody new is coming to this class. Give me your top 5 things that you recommend, and it could be anything from basic snacks to notepad, whatever. 5 things. Joel, go.
Oh my goodness. 5 things.
I know what your first one is. Skittles.
Well, you need a lot of Skittles to get through 3 days. Highly recommend that. Got to keep that brain fed. Notes. I have never taken notes on this level before in one of these types of classes. I've been to a lot of lecture heavy classes, but not where I felt so like you are compelled to take notes, and if without them, I don't know how you're gonna get anything useful out of these classes. So, I mean, you absolutely need to be prepared for that. I would certainly wouldn't hurt you to be working on your holdovers a little bit, set yourself up for success for a class like this. That's certainly big. Perhaps in light of all the low light stuff, if you have multiple weapon lights or things like that around. I would not go out buying stuff immediately or anything like that. But if you've accumulated a lot of gear, it might be worth bringing that stuff along just to compare and see what works better and be able to try different things.
Last one. Make it good.
Bring a good attitude.
There you go. That's really good. That's like perfect.
Be ready to learn things. Be ready to be humbled. You know, you think you're the top guy, you know, be prepared because you might find something out different.
All right. So Joel took all the good ones.
Yeah, I'm glad I got the first one.
Well, and for you, Heath, I'd like to get your insight for both student and even from the instructor side, what you would like to see students, recommend. To add to what Joel had, I honestly really only have two. The one that really gets overlooked a lot is bring a lot of water, because nobody stays well hydrated, and people start to, you can tell when people are starting to get gassed, they're getting dehydrated, along with water, Advil. Make sure you bring a bottle of Advil, because when you do get dehydrated, you're going to end up with headaches, and then that's going to be uncomfortable too. My other big one is do not buy gear for the class. If there's something you need to meet the course requirements, like, okay, there's going to be a low light segment and I don't have a light on my gun, reach out to the instructors and ask what they recommend. Don't think, no, I got this. I watched a YouTube video and somebody says this one is great. A lot of those people are paid. It's not actually great. And now you're buying twice. So, the guys who are teaching the courses are typically not being paid by any of the companies out there. Some of them may be sponsored, but like DE has some personal relationships with Cloud. That's not why they push their lights. They push their lights because they are extremely high quality. So, and maybe there's a discount code or something like that available that they can set you up with ahead of time so that you can save a little money. Maybe it was outside of your budget. Now, oh, hey, they got this discount code and it put it right in line with what I was looking to buy anyway. So I think these classes are thinking classes, not gear-driven classes. So spend less time focused on that, more time focused on, like Joel said, going into the class with the right mental attitude. Yeah, and I think that's all good. You kind of hit on all the good spots. The one thing I'll say is if you're able to, don't get in that morning. I think that's kind of an important thing.
Yes.
So you're well rested. If you're able to, some people aren't. There's one guy in particular that I know that we've trained with before at other classes for DE and Prac-Tech and stuff, and sometimes he's coming in that morning, right? But he's able to do that. Not everybody can. So if you're able to, come the night before, get the hotel, whatever, get a good night rest, and be ready to learn. The gear thing, I'm going to ditto on that one. I actually grabbed this. It's kind of funny that you said that. This was one of the things that I listened to very early on in my training.
Yeah.
What the hell is that?
Oh yeah,
Somebody recommended that?
Yep, this is tactical. So it is a green laser
Look at
with
that.
a white light with pressure pads for each one individually. So I think this is. I actually want to do a show, and maybe we should do that one of these.
That looks like a telephone cord coming up.
where we go through all
Joel,
of the bad gear we have.
We're
But-
dating ourselves now. Wait,
Yeah, see?
telephones had
See,
cables?
it works. It works. You can see on the sign. See, green
Oh,
laser
Yeah,
and
that's
momentary,
greenish
Oh, yeah.
and light-ish.
kind of on. Kind of on.
Hey,
So another.
I got
yeah.
piles of that kind of stuff too over the years, but
Oh yeah, I keep this to remind me what the hell was I thinking. But then I have boxes and boxes of gear.
I've got one right next to me.
I think I was telling Rob and Tony I want to get a little flea market set up at the next airsoft event and be like, hey guys, I got a light and laser for you. I use this in CQB. You need to run this. And start just
I mean,
unloading
like,
shit.
That could be SEAL Team 6 right there. Airsoft,
No,
but you know.
2 even better. But well, again, guys, I really appreciate you spending the time on, going on an hour 45 here. So, those listening, thanks for hanging in with us. It's always good to get some of this out. Me being newer to training than you guys, going into my second year here. It's always hard to get a good grasp at things. I know a lot of guys do different reviews on classes, and I try to get instructors involved to hear from the instructor. And I got a hybrid instructor student here, and Joel, my partner, and just like to talk through these things so it doesn't seem intimidating. CQB, everybody talks about CQB. It's more than just being a cool SWAT guy. It's knowing how to truly run your gun in real life situations. So again, I appreciate it. I'm going to give you the last little bit here to shamelessly plug anything and everything where people can find you, all of that stuff. Joel, I'll let you go first. Let us know where we can find Zulu. Again, great gear that you kick out. So let us know where we can find you.
Yeah, so ZuluNylonGear.com or Zulu Nylon Gear on Facebook and Instagram and all that stuff. Just trying to provide quality gear, and it thrills me to see that stuff out there being used, and all that kind of stuff. So check it out.
Yeah, and I'll have to say you do really cool stuff. If you need anything, you can check it out on his website, or you can get it from Tactically Custom. So I'll throw that little shameless plug right there. I know a guy. Heath, go ahead. Give me all the rundown for your shameless plugs. We'll be here for an hour, but
it feels like it. All right, so both Joel and I are instructors at Front Sight Solutions in Hinckley, Illinois. And so we're both out there pretty frequently. And then I'm a host on Practically Tactical. So you can find me there if you've got questions, comments, whatever. And then let's see, AI with Defense Elements. You can find me with Tactically Customs. Reach out to Nick if you need anything. I feel like I'm forgetting something else too, but we'll leave it at that. That's a pretty rough list.
Pretty
as it is.
extensive list. So
extensive or rough, however you want to put that.
Well, again, guys, I appreciate everything. Again, hanging out with me here for a couple hours tonight and going through this. Again, any questions that any of you have, feel free to email me or message me through Facebook, email, website, tacticallycustom.com, and definitely be able to help you out. Check out the guys over at DE, Defensive Elements. All their tag information for Joel, Heath, and DE will be in the description here. But definitely check them out. Front Sight Solutions, I'll plug them as well since you guys AI with them. A lot of great classes that they offer, from intro. Joel, you do a intro to rifle class for, again, new shooters. Kind of learn everything you can about the gun, get a really good zero on how to shoot, to, pistol level 1, 2, rifle. You guys do low light pistol classes, vehicle classes. We're getting ready to do one this weekend.
Sunday is vehicle class.
So I should have this posted by then. But if it's after Sunday, we do a couple of those a year. So definitely check them out. That is my home range that I go to. I drive 2 hours to get there. So again, I appreciate everything. Thank you again for joining us this evening, and I will catch you on the next ACR. Have a good night, guys.
Good night.